start talking at maybe right at 3:02, or just let people know we're just going to wait a couple minutes for folks to give them a minute to log in, and she's going to do a welcome for 5 minutes, and then she's going to introduce Irma. Irma will have 3 minutes, and Irma will introduce Denise. And then Denise will have 3 minutes, and Denise will introduce Senator Souls. And then we will go into, I want to say, let me look at my agenda really quickly, maybe about 25 minutes till about 3:40. You have Senator Souls to just be open on how you would like to share the updates. If you finish early, that's okay. We can go into the question and answer. Mary is going to let the attendees know to put any questions in the chat box. I'm going to monitor those, and I'll be emailing them to Denise, who will then, at the end when you're done, Senator, you can just say something like, at this time we're going to go ahead and start to answer the questions in the chat box. And then that'll be Denise's cue to jump on and read them one at a time, and then you will answer them.
Guys,
so
it's already 3 o'clock. I just think we should go ahead and start broadcasting. I apologize if I interrupted, but I think there's people that might log on at 3 exactly, so I'm going to go ahead and start.
Just one quick question.
Oh, yeah. Yes,
Alice, when you say I'm just going to introduce Denise, right? I'm not going to say anything about my union. It's just an introduction to Denise, right?
You have 3 minutes. If you want to introduce yourself, of course, who you are, and the bargaining unit and who you represent, and and then you can say, I'd like to introduce Denise.
Okay, guys, I'm sorry, I'm gonna start because it's 3:01, and I think people, if they log on, if there's no one on, they're gonna think that we're gonna. Okay, so I'm gonna broadcast.
Okay,
we're going live. I will tell you once we have someone. Right now, there's no one.
Yeah, we have
just all of us.
27, 30.
But we are live now.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes.
Yeah, there's 73 participants on right now.
Thanks for joining us. We're good. What's that?
I just stopped my video. Sorry.
Okay. So welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in about a minute. We have Senator Bill Souls with us today, and we will be starting in just one moment. So I think I'll go ahead and get started. I don't want to get us too far behind schedule, and people are certainly welcome to jump on as they will. My name is Mary Parr Sanchez, and I am the president of NEA New Mexico. And I come from the Las Cruces local, and so I say hello to all of my colleagues and union brothers and sisters down in Las Cruces. And I want to give you a little bit of housekeeping information so we can proceed on with the meeting. We have a chat box feature, and we would encourage you to use it. And Lori is already welcoming all the panelists today. Thank you very much, Lori. The chat box is the way that this type of a session can be interactive, in that you can put questions either in the chat box or in the question and answers. And that's how we we can ask Senator Souls those questions. We are running this meeting in webinar mode, meaning that only the panelists will be able to mute and unmute their picture and their voice. And because we really are today featuring Senator Souls and our two local presidents, our leaders in Las Cruces. We have our CSEC Las Cruces president, and we have our NEA Las Cruces president here with us, and I'm going to introduce them in just a moment. I know if you are from Las Cruces, and many of the people on this webinar are, you have had quite a year in 2019 and 2020. You started the year in October in a pandemic, not a pandemic, but a ransomware attack, and that must seem so long ago, and yet not in some ways. So you lost all access to technology in October, but by March we were in the middle of a pandemic and you had to switch to a completely virtual environment after having not had access to your virtual lives for a while. So you have really had just an incredibly awful year, maybe, and I know that y'all are warriors and troopers, so you're hanging in there, but it has been quite a year for you. So we'll see how the rest of 2020 treats us in 2021. So at this time, I'm going to introduce Irma Valdespino, and she is the Classified School Employees Council president. She has been an advocate for our classified school employees and all our employees in Las Cruces and across the state for many years. Irma is one of the few from New Mexico that has been recognized for her outstanding work and achievement by NEA National. She received a national award as advocate, and she does a tremendous job. And we know that moving into the 2020-2021 school year, there are going to be lots of moving parts, and you're going to need a strong advocate like Irma Valdespino. So it's my pleasure to introduce Irma to you, and I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for the very nice introduction. As Mary said, my name is Irma Valdespino, and I'm the proud president of the Classified School Employees Council. We're known as CSEC Las Cruces, and I represent 11 groups of classified staff, and our bargaining unit is over 1,200 classified employees, and these include EAs, custodians, our nutrition services workers, our physical plant department, our techs, our computer techs, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought. And our secretaries, of course, and I hope I haven't forgotten any group, our guards. So it's a pretty large, diverse group that my union represents, and I'm very proud of our union. I think we have done a lot of accomplishments through the years for our classified employees as far as determining their rights and terms and conditions of employment. At this time, very briefly, I would like to recognize those classified essential employees that were out there when the schools were closed, but nonetheless, they were out there as essential employees doing what needed to be done for our children in our community. Those employees were the nutrition services workers who served thousands of meals through the school months and continue here in the summer through FYI. Also our custodians as well, they were there in the front line disinfecting the buildings. I'd like to recognize also our security guards that were assisting the nutrition services workers handing out the food, and also EAs as well, and our physical plant department who were there out in the front line as well, making sure that the maintenance of the buildings continued. So a big shout out to them. And they continue to work during the summer. They are working 8 hours again in preparation for the opening of schools. And these are the employees that we call there in the serving our employees behind the lines, but actually now they are the employees at the front line. So a big shout out to them, and I'm very proud of them. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Denise Sheehan. She is the NEA Las Cruces president. Denise also is an advocate for certified staff. She's also on the NEA New Mexico Board of Directors, so she gets to advocate at that level. So hi Denise, and you're on.
Hello, everybody. So you can't see me, but I'm here. Thank you, Irma, for the introduction. I am very, very proud to serve as your NEA Las Cruces president, now going on my 3rd year, I believe, and so hopefully going strong. You know, I just want to echo what Mary said. We have had one heck of a year in Las Cruces, but we are very, very thankful for Senator Souls, and I have the privilege of introducing Senator Souls to everybody so we can hear, you know, what's going on up there in Santa Fe. So I just want to thank Senator Souls for all of his hard work. He is a friend of education. He has been our senator since 2013, and I know he's, you know, still wanting to continue with his work. And he is also the chair of the Senate Education Committee. And I would just really like to emphasize, you know, that he needs us as much as we need him. So if there's any way, now that the legislative session is over, if we can, you know, go on to his website, and there's a little link there where we can, you know, support him financially on his campaign, that would be great. I think the work that he does is extremely important, and we have a voice there. He is our very own colleague. He went back to the classroom. He's never left education. He knows, he gets it. So we need people like him representing us up in Santa Fe. So without further ado, I introduce Senator Souls. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody being on. I understand there's 7,500 people or something on. I'm not sure, but really appreciate everybody taking some time out of your afternoon to be here. We just got back from the special session, and before I forget, we're working on getting the website back up and running. There isn't a website right now. So, and I'll mention now and also at the end, if anyone is interested in donating to my campaign, you would donate to elect William Souls, or William, I can't even remember right now, I'm all tongue-tied. William Souls for Senator or something of that sort on the check, and send it to 5054 Silver King, Las Cruces 88011. If you want to text me or whatever directly, but we're working on trying to get the website up and running. Also, if you are a Twitter fan, that's where I put out most of my information about what's going on in education and other things. I currently have almost 2,500 followers. I need 50 of you to go onto my Twitter at Senator Souls and join my Twitter to get me up to 2,500 Twitter followers, but that's a good place to get information also. I got back late Saturday night from the legislative session. By late, I got home about 11 o'clock. I was hoping they were going to finish sooner than that so that I wouldn't have quite so much drive at night. We were up there for 3 days, and the best way I could describe how things worked for education is it could have been worse. We did not do great things for education. Again, this session was a result of the economic changes of the oil and gas market tanking worldwide and the coronavirus. And the two of those double whammy, the good things that we had accomplished for education back in February pretty well got wiped out. Most of this budget, while the final numbers was just about a wash with last year's budget, we didn't make any progress where we thought we had made really good substantial gains last legislative session, and we had to redo the budget and took away all of those gains. So where we thought we were going to get 4% salary increases for everyone, it's not going to happen. The governor had come in with a salary proposal for teachers of 2%, but the finance committee, I don't serve on finance, and they pretty well had set on, and it turned out at about 1% salary increase. And it's pretty well guaranteed for people making less than 50,000, but administrators and those making over 50,000, that 1% probably isn't going to materialize. It's not in the language that they have to give a 1% thing, but that there is money to do so. Some of that money, it's always what they call averaging language, and most of that money is going to get eaten up by people that are moving tiers, and also, and it's long overdue, but where we have raised the minimum salary for the lowest workers up into, we're over $10 an hour in the NAP by raising the minimum wage. So I was worried things were going to be worse, but they turned out, we did not as bad as it could have been. I don't know how better to do it. I wasn't really pleased with it as the bill was coming up for a final vote. I made a short little speech about how education seems to always be the one where people go to get the money, and we need to start making it an investment in our future, because that's what's going to rebuild our state. Being up there was bizarre in the time of COVID. We know as school gets going, almost certainly everyone's going to be required to wear masks, as we currently are in public and other places, and it's going to be absolutely critical at school. And having been in a situation where for 3 days straight I had to wear a mask, I can tell you, if you have a mask that's not really, really comfortable, go find one. Because after 2 days, the tops of my ears were getting little blisters from the things going around my ears. And I found another mask that more went around my head instead of looping over your ears. Because it's not bad wearing a mask for 20 or 30 minutes while you're in a grocery store, but if you're going to be in a school for 6 hours and have to have it on the whole time, it is not going to be fun. Some other things you might be interested in. I think the report is coming out today. It may already have been put out, but I had served on the re-entry task force, the school's re-entry task force, and was a piece of that. There were about 50 people. I think, Mary, you were on it, and some others. The things coming out of that, and I had a short conversation with Secretary Stewart yesterday and asked him, he didn't want me to share things until it was public, but I now understand everything is public, is schools are going to open at 50% of capacity. And so districts are going to be looking at doing almost an A-B schedule. Half the students will come for 2 days, half the students will come for the other 2 days, while the other ones have homework and things. And then 1 day will be reserved, probably maybe between those two groups, to do deep cleaning of the schools. Whether schools reopen and whether they stay open is going to depend on the virus. This virus doesn't read our memos. This virus doesn't care. My virus doesn't care that we're tired of it, doesn't care that kids need to be in school. It doesn't care. And so we're going to be in reactive mode until there is a vaccine. So where schools statewide are going to be opening in a blended type of model, partly distance learning, partly in-person learning with half capacity so we can practice more social distancing. Some districts, based on what the virus is doing in those communities, may get to move towards more full instruction. Other communities, if there are outbreaks, if there are cases within the schools, may go to completely distance type of learning. It's going to be based not on what the community wants, based on what the superintendent wants. It's going to be based on the health metrics coming out of the Department of Health for those communities as to which area they'll be able to follow. And anything I tell you right now, the only thing I can tell you for certain is whatever I'm telling you is going to be wrong. It's going to change. It will change. And so, we're going to be doing the best that we can. I was very passionate up there. I was teaching part-time in the spring when all of this hit and we went to distance education, and I was teaching AP psychology, very motivated students that tend to like school and be doing things. And I can tell you the distance education was better than nothing, but not a whole lot more. I still don't know how we're going to do distance or continuous learning, remote learning with, for instance, elementary behavior disorder kids. I mean, how do you do that? I mean, the teachers doing that they are amazing. As far as for teachers, be ready and be ready for things to be different and to change on a regular basis. The things that are kind of non-negotiable is we are going to take care of people whose health is compromised. They may be put where they're able to work entirely from home, coordinating and organizing and working with more the distance education level of students. If there are outbreaks in schools, people are going to be quarantined for 14 days, and possibly entire schools are going to be quarantined for 14 days. All of the support staff, you all are incredibly important to our schools and how the schools function, and your lives are going to change as well. You are likely to be doing lots more interacting with students in assisting with whether they should be at school or not. Bus drivers are going to be the first ones to see children in the morning as to whether they've got the sniffles or a fever. We still don't know whether we're going to do universal temperature sensing when students get on the bus. And then what do you do if a child does have a temperature? Do you leave them at the side of the road? You can't do that. And, so there's more unknowns than there are knowns at this point. I could certainly talk about, if you'd like, other things that happened in the legislature, because it wasn't just budget. There were some issues that were set up, or some programs set up for small businesses to try and protect them. All of the things happening with the Black Lives Matter and the colonization field that we have. There were, New Mexico is now going to require body cams for all law enforcement. And so anytime they're interacting with anyone, they must have the camera on. We passed legislation dealing with the elections coming up. It got watered down. I was disappointed with some of the things that happened with that, but we still got some important pieces there that allow the county clerks and the Secretary of State to be able to host a more remote election and a mail-in ballot type of election coming up. And we fixed some of the laws that were necessary in order to be able to do that. I think more than anything, I know you all have questions, and I'll do my very best to answer them as openly, honestly as possible. But understand, as I said, anything I tell you almost certainly is going to be wrong and is going to change. And so it's where we're starting and what we think is going to happen at this point, but we really aren't in control of this. The virus is going to make the biggest choices and decisions about what's going to happen. And so I think with that, Denise, was it Denise or Mary is going to start handling the question section of it, and I certainly will do my best to try and answer questions.
Yes, go ahead, Mary.
I was just going to look in the questions in the chats. Denise, is that what you were going to do, or did you have some
Yes.
questions of your own that you were going to ask first?
So I know that some of the questions in the box were answered, and so Alice just sent me the ones that I will be asking. So I'll go ahead and start with the first question. So we have this question is, what about teachers making over 50,000?
My guess and understanding is what went through on that is teachers making over 50,000, you're probably going to stay at right about where you are. There's not going to be salary increases. What districts are looking at trying to do, the finance committee talks about districts using their cash reserves and some of the other monies that they have in order to ensure that nobody is going to have a lower take-home pay than they had last year. Insurance costs are going up, some other costs are going up, and so districts I know are working and going to be trying to at least make sure that they balance out any of those increases with pay increases. But it's going to be on individual districts. Some districts are in better shape than other districts to manage and handle that. And kind of along those same lines, one of the things I was a bit frustrated with, and I've been on the phone with Superintendent Trujillo and other superintendents, is the federal government gave CARES Act money directly to schools for them to work on the extra costs associated with the COVID-19 virus. There were cleaning costs, there were technology costs, a number of other things, and the districts had spent a bunch of that money. Well, the finance committee went and took credit for that and essentially said that if you got any of those monies, we're counting that as part of the monies that you would have gotten from the state. And I don't think that was the right thing to do, because that was assuming that districts didn't have additional costs as a result of the virus. So just kind of another one of the little asides, and I probably, as you ask questions, I'll fill in some other pieces as they come up.
Yes, thank you. So our next question is, why can't the governor declare a financial state of emergency and open up the permanent fund? It's really raining in New Mexico.
I agree. I'm not sure that that's the way the permanent fund, that even by declaring an emergency that she's able to get into it like that. And we had a very important primary election. The makeup of the legislature absolutely will look different when we get back up there in January. And my guess is there will be more serious and open discussions about how we can use some of the permanent fund going forward to support the investments that we need to make in education. The return on the investment when we put it into education is way better than what we're getting out of Wall Street. All the data indicates that nationwide, and we ought to be using that money to invest in education rather than investing in Wall Street. And I think you're going to see that that's going to be a real change. But it gets back to elections, and educators are wonderful as far as being a strong voting bloc, but you all need to make sure you get out and get other people to go out and vote, both for what's going on at the national level, but also here at the local level, are really critical and important elections that directly affect your lives and your livelihoods.
Yes, thank you. Next question is there money in the budget for teacher training with online learning through accepted curriculum, such as Envisions, Math, and Journeys Literacy Online?
There is some money in the budget for professional development. Most of that is going to be on how does the local district use that, but that also means you don't have money other places. The biggest thing, and everybody recognizes that as teachers, most of us are not experts in online learning. And even the best of online learning is not as good as in-person learning. It's good for highly motivated students, but for others, it's more like a better than nothing learning. The problem is the amount of training that we all as teachers need is beyond the number of days that we've got training available. And so we're going to be doing lots of catch up. I think there's going to be kind of very broad general types of training. And as people get comfortable with that, more and more specific kinds of training. But the days that we've got for professional development are only a few, and it's a major shift in how we're going to be doing education. And you can't get everybody up to speed as quickly as we need to. So a lot of it is, I think we're going to be trying to make do as best we can. And those of you who are really good technology experts, please help out those of us that are kind of the old guard and, you know, that still have our VCR. Some of you still have those. I do. Your VCR is still blinking 12 because we don't know how to fix it because my 12-year-old grew up.
Denise,
Yes.
I wanted to follow up with Senator Souls, and because this is a question that's in the question and answers, not the chat, and it's around the increase for staff. And so this is what my understanding of that is, Senator Souls. Originally, I think we had posted some information about the 1% for the state workers. So it's not public school employees. There is enough money in the SEG for every education employee to get a 1% average, was my understanding. However, what Senator Souls told you, that any money to be used for COVID expenses and that was given directly to districts, that is now being subtracted out of the state equalization guarantee amount. And so districts are going to be, so there's a lot of room. NEA Las Cruces is a collective bargaining local, and a lot of that, and CSEC Las Cruces is a collective bargaining local, and many of those decisions are going to be made at the bargaining table. But Senator Souls, back to that staff increase, it was for state workers making over $50,000. Isn't that correct?
Yes, but public school people fall into that same category. And, you know, I want to caution a little bit, and it's one of the things I get very frustrated with, is when they say there's enough for everyone to get a 1% average. That means half the people are not going to get a 1%, and some people are going to get more than that, and some may get nothing. And so don't expect a 1%. You know, you might be one of the fortunate ones, but it's average language, and lots of that is going to get used by those people who are moving up in what are they in to a tier 3 or a tier 2 from a tier 1, is where a lot of that 1% is going to go. So it's not everybody's going to get a 1%. It's a 1% average among everyone, and that means some are going to get little or none.
Thank you. Okay, so our next question, how do you feel about the entire state opening together at the same time versus having some separate districts opening with their own plans?
I think what matters is it's not up to the individual districts on opening up with their own plans. I think it really is up to the health orders as to how and where we open up. I know there are some communities that have had very few cases, and some of those are over on the east side of the state. But the east side of the state is also right next to Texas, which right now is exploding in cases. And I know there have been a number of people who have gone to sport camps over in Texas and other places. And, you know, I think the plan is for everyone to open up at that 50%. All the kids will be going, but they'll only be going half of the time, and see how that goes. See whether, you know, there are any cases spiking, and then it'll be more up to individual districts based on the health metrics within those districts as to whether they'll be allowed to open up more fully or whether they'll need to shut down more than that. It really is not an education decision as to whether to open up or not. It's a health decision as to whether to open up or not.
Thank you. Okay, next question. For teachers and educators who have a disability, such as hearing and vision, remote learning impacted their work as many needed to collaborate with a mainstream classroom teacher. How will a plan, or any plan, support educators with a disability in this competitive journey?
I don't know. I don't know what else to tell you. Certainly, we want to make sure we're protecting the health of people, but people with a disability, It will be up to building principals, to the district human resources, to ensure that everybody has a position where they're able to make positive contributions to education here in Las Cruces or in whatever your district is. I've been telling superintendents for the last 2 months or so, and school boards, and working with the school board people, that they're going to have to be a whole lot more active. That instead of school boards meeting twice a month, school boards might start meeting twice a week, because there are going to be decisions that need to be made right now as to how do we manage this? What do we do about this? And there's going to be a lot more decisions made on the fly as to, here's somebody with a unique circumstance. How do we protect them and their job? From what I've heard from superintendents around the state, is they are committed to their staff. They recognize the value of the staff, and for people that because of the virus that a job isn't there, or they can't work at a particular site because of health reasons or disabilities, that superintendents will work to try and find a position and a situation that will be useful for the person. I think it's going to be lots up to the unions to kind of, in very positive ways, work with the districts to make those situations all function as well.
Thank you. Next question. For districts opening in a hybrid model, how will employees return to work for 4 days if they have children under 12 that only go to school 2 days a week?
Oh my, I know. We don't have all those things figured out, because our teachers are parents as well. And if we have kids who are only in school 2 days, and it's, by the way, it's not just teachers, but the parents are going back to work, and the kids are in school only 2 days and are home for 2 days, that might work if you have high school, junior high, or middle school, high school level. But if you've got first and second graders, how can you have them home part-time and in school part-time? And what do we do in the meantime? Is how do we set up daycare and childcare? There are so many things that are just unknown at this point. And we're all going to have to be incredibly flexible to try and get through this. And we're going to get through it together, because there isn't any option. And, kind of as I said before, the virus doesn't care that we're tired of it. It's going to continue to do what it's going to do, and we're going to need to figure out ways of getting around that. And kind of on those same lines, as teachers, you are the front lines for the social workers and community service people, and your kids' lives are greatly impacted, which means they're going to come to school stressed. They're going to come to school where things are not good at home, and you're going to need to step up and do all of those things too. And so I think all we can hope for is we're all going to try and do the best we can, but there are not answers and solutions by any means to all of these questions.
Thank you. Next question is, in the New Mexico PED plan for reopening New Mexico public schools for this upcoming school year, why are district employees being required to take temperature checks and COVID-19 testing and not students?
I'm not sure I can answer that clearly. That's more of a health type of thing. Adults, all of the things that I've heard about the virus, at least so far, is children, students seem to, for whatever reason, not spread it as easily as adults do. We also, as the employees in the schools, there's a bit more of your job responsibility of making sure that you don't come to school or come to work when you are sick. Last week, before going up to the legislature, they had or recommended that we all get tested for COVID. I went over to Memorial Medical Center. They open at 7 in the morning. I was there at 6:45. I think I was 9th person in line, and it was incredibly efficient. And you hear about these awful ones where they stick a swab way up your nose. This one was a lot more stick your tongue out and they touch the back of your throat with it. It was far less invasive and took only 5 or 10 minutes. The thing with testing is, what that says is I didn't have COVID-19 at that time. It doesn't say anything about whether I will get it in the future. And quite frankly, right now I'm sitting at home by myself because I'm quarantined now for 1 to 2 weeks. At least that's what Cassandra tells me, because I was up in Santa Fe and a whole lot of legislators, whether their protests or whatever, decided not to wear masks or wore them inappropriately below their nose and other things. And I tried to avoid them, but we're all going to be getting some level of exposure. We've got better control over the adults in the workplace than there's control over the students in the workplace. My guess is once there is a vaccine that's similar to the other vaccinations required to enter school, children will be required to have the vaccine. But as far as getting tested for things, I think it's very similar. Before you're allowed to work in the public schools, you have to go and get a TB test. We all had to do that this falls into that same category.
Thank you. The next one is a comment by one of our participants, and it says, in low SES school districts, students have little to no support from parents for online learning. We learned this during the COVID-19 quarantine. Perhaps since we are returning at half capacity, we should do 2 days with half population and then 2 days for the other half. Monday and Tuesdays Group A, Wednesday and Thursdays Group B. Fridays are for teachers to call parents and also planning. So that was a comment.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense, and it's one of the things, and we know that our most motivated students, and when there was a lot of support at home, probably did okay, but the opportunity gap was laid bare by this virus, that not all kids have the opportunities by just even having parents at home that know how to help them get on the technology to be successful. And we as a society, not as educators, we as a society have to do better.
Yes, thank you for that. Next question is, how will this look like for medically fragile students who have multiple disabilities and require one-on-one assistance or have a one-on-one assistant or therapies?
Again, yeah, I can tell you what I think things are going to look like. Is my guess is those are likely to continue to where they will still have the one-on-one, and maybe both of them are going to be getting tested and on a regular basis. But I don't see how that necessarily is going to change all that much. Certainly if they're medically fragile, where being exposed to other people who might be carriers of the virus, there might be more online or home learning, or even people going to the home to do education with them. I know when I was a principal, we used to always there were some teachers that would go and do the home visiting types of education with students who were sick or were unable to attend school for some other reason.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, how will those extra 10 days that were added to the school calendar be utilized this coming school year?
I don't know yet. They were added to the calendar because we know we are shortchanging students and the number of days that they're getting of school, and those extra 10 days give us an opportunity to try and make some of that back up. Most likely they'll get tacked on towards in the spring, when hopefully, we're all hoping there'll be a vaccine and the world might be returning to normal more, and having those available at that time. But I don't know. We don't know how those are going to function and work, whether they will just be added on days that look like normal school, or some sort of extracurricular looking types of extended learning. We don't know. And so it was put in there as sort of a plan to try and help mitigate the lack of education, the shortchanging as far as the direct time with students that we know is going to be happening through this next year.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 national board questions. I'm going to ask both of them together because I think you can probably address them both. So it says during the regular session, $500,000 was set aside to support teachers pursuing national board certification. Will those scholarships still be available this fall? And the other question was, will the budgeting for this year affect national boards recipients?
And my answer to both of those is I don't know. I don't know. I don't recall anybody talking about the specific money for national board scholarships and whether that was pulled back. My guess, just because they were sanding and sweeping every place they could, that I don't know whether that is still in the budget or not. So I can't answer that at this point. I don't know.
Thank you. Next question is there already a plan for increasing group sizes outside of the school setting? Currently, we are at a max group of 5. When will that change?
That's going to change when people's behavior changes. I mean, this is more of a general question, and I'm in regular contact with the governor's office on just the coronavirus plans and what's going on with it. And right now, if you watch the national news, New Mexico is this nice little green area between bright red Arizona and bright red Texas. And lots of that is because we have been much slower to reopen things than the other states that are now seeing huge spikes in their numbers. I get very disappointed when I go out and I see people who think it's all a hoax. They aren't wearing a mask. They don't care. If everybody follows the social distancing expectations of always wearing a mask, washing their hands regularly, keeping group sizes to relatively small, then things will continue to get better and we'll be able to open more businesses, movie theaters where, partial capacity and spreading the people out more. I mean, other kinds of things will happen. But the governor's office continues to watch the numbers and get reports from around the state of people that are like, oh, it's over, or they become so jaded to it that people have quit wearing masks out in public. And quite frankly, that's what's going to slow down the additional opening. If everybody is wearing a mask and takes this seriously, we will get to more opening quicker than not.
Thank you. Next question says, Chairman, thank you for your service. There was a conversation about holding our lowest wage employees harmless for increases in premiums. Any requirements that districts hold them harmless and increasing compensation to offset increases?
I don't think that was in the legislation, though it's in the expectation as districts turn in their budgets, that employees don't get cut or have pay cuts as a result of increases in premiums and things of that sort. Those were some of the pieces that were moving around a lot up there as to whether things got in or didn't get in. But certainly the expectation from districts is to take care of your employees, and particularly those at the bottom end. I get a little frustrated when I'm up there because I overhear comments from legislators that say things like, oh, those teachers are whining. None of them have missed a paycheck. And I'm like, that just doesn't fly very well. Teachers have worked awfully dang hard on trying to get all these things to happen and have been underpaid for years, and that kind of language is just very frustrating. But I think as educators, we recognize that the people on the lower end of the salary schedules are just barely getting by, and we need to make sure that they don't suffer more as a result of their position. And those of us that are doing a little bit better, it's like, all right, we're going to put off the pay increases we should have gotten several years ago for another year or two. And we're not doing great, but we need to take care of those at the lower end where they're right on the edge of falling into poverty or needing more government assistance.
Thank you. Next question. How can the district use cash balances for salaries since it is a recurring expense?
They can't. However, budgets are such there may be some things where they can use cash balances for more one-time things, freeing up other monies. And so would they actually be supplanting those. And so you can't use cash balances to cover salaries, but you might be able to use the cash balances to cover some other things that frees up money that can be used for salaries. It's going to be some huge challenges for superintendents, finance officers, school boards on how they're going to get through all of this, and it's going to be painful. And one of the things, we're talking about just getting through this year. We are not in that bad a shape this year. Come January, we have a hole of about $1.5 billion just to keep the numbers at what we have right now. That's going to be really scary, because that really is where we're going to start talking about cuts, where this really was readjustments of the increases that we had. We had to pull those all back. Next year, if things don't turn around in oil and gas and that we get more of a U-shaped recovery, it's going to be a lot of bloodletting come January, and people like me and others are going to be up there trying to protect education, but it's going to be tough.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Thank you. Next question.
That's where I keep having kind of this attitude is it could be worse.
Yes.
I apologize. I tend to be really optimistic, and I want to try and be optimistic, but things are still likely to get worse before they get better.
Yes. Thank you. The next one is, can you elaborate more on legislation being quote unquote watered down?
Remind me where that quote, or when I talked about things being watered down, in reference to what?
I'm not sure. It just says if you could elaborate more on the legislation being watered down.
And I'm not sure, I don't remember exactly what it was that I was talking about at that point. Somebody just put up, it was on voting. Initially, the legislation in committee, had a piece in it that, based on, I think it was 60 days out from the election, that local county clerks could declare an all-mail ballot process or voting process. It was for only a one time. It's not forever. It was just for the vote this fall. And the Republicans and a couple of the conservative Dems on that committee pulled that piece off of it, which was one of the real strong pieces on the voting portion. There was kind of behind the scenes debate about whether that should get added back in on the floor, but the other parts of that voting bill were so important to get passed that there was concern that if we tried to amend the other pieces back in, we might have lost the whole bill and not been able to do some of the more absentee voting that was in the rest of the bill that was really necessary. And so what was then a really strong voting bill got watered down in that committee. And then on the Senate floor, an amendment was added that started to make for open primaries that would continue after this. Now, open primaries have nothing to do with why we were up there on an emergency session, but it got added in. And similarly, instead of having a major fight about that, the Senate passed it. When that bill got over to the House, it was very interesting in that initially the House voted it down. I think it was like 36-34 and voted it down. And this was an important bill, and it got voted down because of the primary voting piece that got added and that piece that was taken off. Several Democrats voted with the Republican to vote against it, which caused a panic among everybody. And they immediately called a short recess, and the caucuses met, and then they had a vote to reconsider and pass the original bill. I was glad they passed the original bill. The Senate had already died and left town, and if they had changed it, we would have had to go back up somewhere today or tomorrow to look at the changes they made. But what had been proposed and taken as a very strong voter bill got changed in the corporations committee. I think it was corporations, maybe it was rules, but in the committee, so that it was not as strong. And so it was That's my comment of more of a watered down bill. It wasn't as good as it could have, should have been, but it certainly protected some of the voting things that we need for November.
Thank you. Next question is, why don't we work with electronic caregivers in Las Cruces? I called and asked them what they could do. We talked about a downloadable app where parents check temperature and answer questions and need a green light.
I'm not familiar with that. Electronic caregivers, I don't know what that is.
Okay, I'm not sure either. So
Sorry,
next
I
question.
have the answer, but I just am not familiar with what that is.
So the next question is, have student attendance requirements written in the law books been relaxed for the school year? How about the status of end of year exams?
My understanding, again, this comes back to, we're going to just have to see what happens. Certainly student attendance, we know, is going to be very different. In talking with the Secretary of Education, he hears from parents that are concerned about it, and they said, long as this virus is still in the community and doing what it's doing, I'm not sending my kids to school. What do you tell a parent? I understand. I quite frankly agree with them. If there's an outbreak in the community, I wouldn't be sending my kids to school either. And so I think there's going to be a lot more flexibility, lots more exceptions for attendance. Also, the end of year exams, I think at this point are way off, and it's to be determined whether we're going to continue to have those based on what happens with the virus. And so, that's way off into May, and I guarantee the world will be different by then. We don't know how.
Thank you. Next question, when is the adjusted unit value going to be determined for the SEG?
I don't know. I don't know. They're still looking at the final numbers. I know we're going to have, let's see, we have a Dem Caucus meeting, I think early next week. The LESC, the Legislative Education Study Committee, will be meeting somewhere around the 20th of July. Those will be some of the things that will be talked about at that point. It really is up to the Secretary of Education to determine what that's going to be. And I know he and his staff are looking at what the outcomes were from this special session. Again, as you know, my conversation with him yesterday, is his attitude was kind of like, yep, could have been worse. The governor's office had wanted more money spent on education and protecting education than what they got. And so I know they're looking at what the final numbers are and where they can put that unit value.
Great, thank you. Next question, what was the thinking behind making such deep cuts in early childhood education?
I think the thinking was, we had just put a lot of money into early childhood that, it really isn't cuts. We readjusted the increases that we had put in there. I disagree with them. I think, that's where we ought to be making investments, not cuts. But I currently don't sit on the finance committee. When I get reelected, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to request to be on the interim finance committee. During regular session, I want to stay chairing education. I want to stay on the conservation. But during the interim, I want to be on the finance committee, because I think with the changes that are going to happen, that we'll have a real opportunity to advocate for more money for early childhood and K-12 and higher ed, where there hasn't been nearly that level of advocacy just in the general thinking about things. We know early childhood education matters. We thought we had started turning the corner and actually getting some funding and investments in that. We had put, and I don't know if the questioner was talking about the $320 million trust fund, and the trust fund wasn't going to spin off much money to real education, and it didn't start for 2 or 3 years anyhow. And so they did pull most of that back and reallocated those monies other places instead of getting that trust fund as fully funded to start off with.
Okay, just a couple more. Why did the legislature approve a percentage increase rather than a straight percentage? And why couldn't they hold essential employees who are the lowest paid be held harmless regarding pay?
Those are great questions that I ask regularly, and lots of times, I comment because they always put in averaging language. They'll say there's enough money for all employees to get 3% average. Well, all employees don't get an average. And so it's wordsmithing things so that it sounds better than it is. And I'm not sure that there's any other reason than that they really don't want to make hard decisions. They want to leave that up to districts and school boards. I don't know how better to put that, but I think that's part of why there's going to be some changes in the Finance Committee and others come January, is so that we start talking about really building up and investing in education. And at the lowest level, legislators, and particularly on the Finance Committee, are hesitant to tell districts exactly what to do. They want to more provide the funds and then put the hard decision onto the local districts on how to implement what their expectation is.
Thank you. So we do have, I think, like 3 more questions, but we are at our time. So, Mary?
So I don't know if I'm the closer, but I think I am. So I first of all wanted to thank Senator Souls for taking the time. And I know we're interested in doing a few more of these webinars in the upcoming weeks. And we really do appreciate you spending time with us. I wanted to thank our hardworking staff and Alice Chavez Villa for setting this up, and Steve Cianes also for giving her some tech support. And we know there's, after hearing the questions and looking at them, one bit of advice that I would give folks that are worried. We are all worried, and it's going to take all of us to untangle this morass, and we have to look out for one another, and we need to take care of each other. And those that can go into work are probably going to need to, and those that have medical conditions where they can't, we're going to have to work together to figure out a way that you can support the mission of the district as well. And there is, we do have the Classified School Employees Council and NEA Las Cruces. You met the presidents today, and we've got Alice Chavez Villa working in Las Cruces to mitigate some of these issues. But all of us are going to have to help one another get through this, because it is just a lot. We've never been in this situation, and we will make it through, but we're going to have to work together. And I believe that's what the senators started off saying. So thank you so much, and we hope to schedule another one very soon. Thanks everybody for coming. Did you have any final words, Senator?
Just thank you all for what you're doing, and I know you're getting ready to start looking at how schools are going to open and what your role is going to be. And remember, we're all in this together. We do it for the kids, we do it for our communities, we're doing it for the future. And certainly if anybody is interested in helping with my campaign as volunteers financially, or if you just want to help me get to 2,500 Twitter followers, go to Senator Souls and like me on Twitter.
So people wanted to know, we were going to put in the chat how people could contribute. Is it Bill for, what is your email, or what is your campaign?
Committee to elect William Souls is what the checks ought to be written to. I don't know if it's back up because we have to have it shut down during the special, but Act Blue, if you want to go in, and there you can do it on a credit card, or you can make it where it's a monthly payment of $10 a month they'll take out each one that goes to the committee. But the committee to elect William Souls, and right now just to my address is as good a place to send it, which is 5054 Silver King Las Cruces 88011, or send me a text or an email. My my phone line is 575-640-0409. Send me a text and I'll send you directly information about all of that. And I'm going to start putting it out more on Facebook and Twitter and things of that sort as we're going into fundraising mode and starting to, I don't know how to campaign distantly. You know, I usually do it by doing lots of door, doing lots more phone calling.
So
Okay.
Alice put all of what Senator Souls just said. Alice did put it in the chat, and we thank you for that. And, you know, campaigns require people, and they do require money. If you don't have money, give of your time. And if you don't have time, give money. So thank you, Senator Souls. We appreciate you, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Keep doing great things for kids.
Thank you.